We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Free Association Radio. This is Robert Phoenix, and you are now listening to Navigating the Astrological Matrix. Welcome again. It's May 1st, May Day. It's Beltane. And we have, I guess, successfully navigated through the high unholy days of the last 2 weeks, which have been calamitous to say the least. The highlight or the low light of which was the Boston Marathon bombings and everything that's ensued from that point forward. That event, by the way, will be just as important as 9/11 as it shapes public opinion and the collective thought forms that we now occupy here in this holographic domain known as planet Earth. And we also had another really interesting little tidbit of information come through just the other day, and it was a group of explorers down in Mexico at Teotihuacan, and they were using these robots to mine the ruins. I've been to Teotihuacan. It's a very powerful place. If you've never been there, I heartily recommend it. It was the centerpiece of the Aztec culture, as it were, in Mexico. Had over 100,000 people. And if you look at the scale of world population at that time, there was estimated to be about 200 million people in the world. I'm sure there are a number of people that are currently holding down positions of power that would absolutely love the population level to be at about 200 million, just like it was in the good old days of the Aztecs. So they had 100,000 people there, and 100,000 people in a world of 200 million people is considered a metropolis. And the Aztecs split. I mean, they just gone, left. Moment's notice, no more, see you later. But there were some cool pyramids there, for sure. The Aztecs didn't build them, though. The Aztecs came in from the north and took them over, but then they left. But there's some cool pyramids. There's the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon, and you can really feel the energies in both of these places. Anyway, this team of archaeologists sent these little robots down beneath the ruins in places where theoretically people can't go and get to. And what they did is they found an interesting sort of network of golden orbs. And those golden orbs were essentially these balls that were covered in pyrite, like fool's gold. And they don't know why they're there, but if you look at sort of the outline of where these orbs are, it looks like a grid. It looks like these golden orbs have formed some sort of a grid underneath the city. Now, I've seen the pictures, and they look like golden rocks to me. But I'm sure that on closer inspection, they probably resemble orbs, and they all probably look very similar. But it's a very interesting discovery, since we are in Taurus. And Taurus represents minerals. It represents the root chakra. It represents the earth. So here we have kind of an astromatrix event in some ways, where something revelatory associated with the sign comes to our consciousness. So it's May Day, May 1st. It was on this day, 1776, by the way, when the Illuminati was formed. That's right. In Bavaria. This is the day where Adam Weishaupt decided to create the secret organization that would overthrow the government in Germany and the world itself. Ingolstadt, Bavaria. Today is the day, and that's why we celebrate May Day. Well, then Beltane, of course, but a lot of times these things converge. So happy birthday, Illuminati. Light a candle for us. Ooh, the candle, isn't that an interesting symbolism? The candle on the birthday cake. That's right. We've had some interesting action with Saturn. Shall we kind of track where Saturn's been and what it's doing? Let's do that. Let's start with Sunday night. Saturn was closer to Earth than, at almost any time, and it was at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday, where it was really kind of hot and heavy. And man, did I feel it. I felt that Saturn. And in Scorpio, we have the opportunity to, because Scorpio is a fixed sign. And one of the things that I liked about fixed signs is that you can actually fix things under the influence of a fixed sign. How do we do that? Well, a fixed sign allows us to make a declaration, or it allows us to make an affirmation. It allows us, the energy of the fixed sign allows us to have an experience where what we say or do is congruent, hopefully, with our will and our higher will. And what happens is that if we are not in a place where we are congruent, then guess what? Things get fixed for us. And this is the universe hopefully having an investment in our lives that says, hey, you've got to have a little bit of a life crisis here. So, and it's okay, because you've participated, you've co-created it, you've been a conspirator in your own awakening, so you may as well just go through it. And fixed signs are one of those zones, or the influence of a fixed sign is one of those zones where life changes can really occur. And because Saturn is in Scorpio now, a fixed sign, we have the opportunity to make significant change to our life at a really fundamental level. Scorpio is about the second chakra. It's not quite survival. It's really about procreation more than anything, which is the next step up from survival, right? You live, you breathe, you eat, you poop, you pee, you sleep. And in order to do it again through the visage and incarnation of another being that's just like you, you have sex. That takes us to the second chakra. That takes us to Scorpio and birth in a lot of ways, right? Birth, life, death. So we're dealing with really fundamental energy, fundamental power, procreative power. These are all aspects of Scorpio. So it gets right down into the most intense and primal areas of our existence. Now, if you're a Freudian or you're post-Freudian, you would have a very psychological take on Scorpio as it relates to the id, that Scorpio would be that libidinous chamber that is tucked away and hidden and sequestered, where all of our nasty little phantasms and demons and unexplored peccadillos, our shame, our guilt, all these things that can turn us into brutish humans within a matter of moments all lurk and reside. Because in the eyes of a Freudian, what people have to do is they have to stem that onslaught of psychic rebellion where all these things hang out. The id is a repository of the murderous and psychopathic urge of every human since the dawn of time. This is what the Freudians believe. There's a more evolved representation of the id in Scorpio, and that more evolved representation is, I think, partially due to the work of Carl Jung, and who was obviously a compatriot, a peer of Freud's. They studied together. They're part of that great group of early psychiatrists that included Alfred Adler, Wilhelm Reich, Jung, and Freud, also known as the Vienna group. So Jung saw the id in a very different sense. Jung saw the id as a manifestation of the collective unconscious. And in some ways, he actually humanizes the id. He gives the id a more of a poetic, and if you are into Jungian symbolism and mythology, the term would be mythopoetic position or slant. So that now we're not just dealing with these murderous and libidinous urges that turn us into Cro-Magnon men and women, but there's this rich pool of imagery and cross-cultural mythology and all these things that are swimming around in there. What Jung does to the collective, what Jung does to the id is he redeems it. And this is in part due to the fact that Jung he wasn't a Catholic, I believe. I believe Jung was a Swedenborgian, if I'm not mistaken. Manuel Swedenborg was a Reformed Presbyterian minister who had conversations with angels and disembodied spirits. And there's a whole Swedenborgian church that evolved out of that. I went to a Swedenborgian Christmas Eve service one time, and it was in Nob Hill, San Francisco, hoity-toity. It's fun. I liked it. Very civilized. So what Jung does is he redeems the id. Because again, this is part of his background, this is part of his collective experience, part of his religious training. And the redemption of the id opens it up, and it makes it far more rich and far more poetic. So when we look at Scorpio from the Jungian perspective, it becomes more of a shamanic energy, more of a shamanic journey for any kind of aspect or anybody that's going through a scorpionic experience in their lives. And the reason it becomes shamanic is because in classical shamanism, the shaman, who is essentially the tribal psychiatrist, the tribal priest, the tribal herb keeper, you name it, for the psychic and the physical health of the tribe, this is what this person did. For a shaman to be able to fully enter into his or her work, they had to go through to life and the death and the rebirth experience. Now, this was either done as a result of something naturally that occurred in your death experience, or something that was in some ways artificially triggered. And what I mean by that is that through ritual and some kind of rigorous series of machinations or ritual exercises to bring a person into some type of awareness of their own mortality, to overcome the fear of death, and to enter into the numinosity or the gnosis of what that's like, and then be able to serve people from the other side of that. And if we look at the tribes in Mesoamerica and the American Southwest, they would use things like peyote in order to have these experiences. In other parts of the United States, if you go up to the plain states, they had things like sun dances. And so there were a lot of these rituals that were used in order to have people break through levels of consciousness at a group level, but also at an individual level as well. And the role of the shaman was passed on from one generation to another generation, usually from shaman to prospective student. This is how it worked. So Scorpio is a very shamanic sign in that we go through these intense experiences and then we resurrect from those intense experiences, hopefully with more knowledge, more wisdom, more insight, more clarity, and more of a sense of purpose than we had before. And when we have Saturn in Scorpio, what we're looking at here is a collective shamanic experience, because we're dealing with scorpionic energy, and Saturn rules society. Saturn rules culture. It is Saturn and Jupiter are the lords of the midpoint, right? Between Saturn and Jupiter, after Saturn and Jupiter, we have the outer planets, and before Saturn and Jupiter, we have the inner planets. So they are the gateway, both Saturn and Jupiter, to the gods, supposedly, because those are the outer planets. But as I've mentioned before on the show, Saturn and Jupiter also have their own respective energies. And you can look at their energies via the planets, via the etymology of the names, all that stuff. Saturn is Satan. Jupiter is Jove or Jehovah. This is what the two energies represent. Saturn cracks. Saturn cracks down on you. Saturn makes things difficult. Saturn makes things hard. Jupiter wants to expand. Jupiter wants to give you miracles, to give you blessings. And there they are. They're dancing next to each other. And so they represent the duality of consciousness, cosmic consciousness, in the panoply of the signs. So with Saturn and Scorpio, collectively what we're doing is we're getting into really intense places. We're trying to understand who's behind the curtain. That's what Saturn and Scorpio is. Who is behind the curtain? And when we have an event like what occurred at the Boston Marathon, and we have all these different threads and people trying to understand what happened, this is a very Saturn and Scorpio experience. This is people trying to understand who is behind what's taking place. What's the real story? And what we're witnessing is probably the rise of the greatest schism that we've seen in this country since the 1960s. I mean, if you look at the collective thought forms of the United States since the 1960s, they're more or less, even though we have these, these party affiliations that split us into these dual factions, the consciousness in the collective thought forms, and again, I'm just talking about the United States. I might throw the rest of the world in there, but I'm just talking about the United States because I live here, is that people were more or less on the same page. You didn't really have people that were angry. Yeah, there was some debate about, lyrics and music. There was maybe a little bit of debate about Anita Bryant and her stance on homosexuality. More or less, people were pretty much on the same page. It wasn't the case in the 60s. The 60s, people were split. It was a very fractious time. And we kind of recovered from that. So in the 70s, people just wanted to heal in the 70s. That's what it felt like. It was a very sleepy time. Then in the 80s had a great amount of potential. I think we really missed the boat in the 80s, by the way. I think that there was a phenomenal energy in the 1980s that was not capitalized on. If you look at the symbol of the 8, it's infinity. And it was really, theoretically, the 80s were supposed to be, in some ways, the apex, spiritually, culturally, artistically, of the 20th century. Because once you get into the 90s, it's all about letting go, and it's all about shifting. And it's okay to let go and shift if you are ready to let go of the repository of the dross of human experience, right? But there was also a fair amount of social engineering that really started to take place in the 90s in a huge way. So what we have now, and again, the 90s were not necessarily a time where people were divided. I mean, there were people that didn't necessarily like Bill Clinton, but the country was making a lot of money. The interest rates were low. People were playing the stock market. The music was pretty good. There was still a record industry. We hadn't had 9/11. So we were more homogeneous, right? But now we're in a time where that's all changed. And it's as fractious now and as split now as it was in the 1960s. Because what we have is we have a group of people that are questioning the status quo. And what we're seeing is the rise of the bubbling up of the conspiracy theory culture. It's happening. That's what one faction of society wants to bubble up and identify. But another aspect of this is the Great Awakening. And the Great Awakening is the conspiracy label, the tinfoil hat stuff. That's the shadow side. That's the ad hominem. That is the ad hominem response or reaction to people waking up. So we are in the midst of the Great Awakening. And there are people that don't like it because what's been painted is that the conspiracy theorists, they don't care. People get hurt in these events. They, they coldly label these events false flags. They say that people in these events are actors. They believe that Obama wasn't born in the United States. They want guns. They're angry. They don't pay their taxes. They're just nasty, hateful people, and the world would be just much better off without them. That is really the dominant theme or the dominant meme around people that are waking up. And it's a strategy to subvert the awakening process. It's a total strategy. And the people that use that strategy are rewarded. Then how you say to yourself, well, how are they rewarded? Well, they're rewarded by being considered normal. They're rewarded by being considered emotionally healthy and sane. So they have their own sort of inbred support system that validates their reality, and that their reality is the one that's psychologically, clinically sane. So this is how things are being set up. And so the sane people see the insane people, and they say, well, let's get rid of the insane people, whatever it takes. Let's get rid of them. The world's better off without them. We don't need them. This is how everything's being formatted. But right now, Saturn is in Scorpio, and Saturn in Scorpio is demanding that we get to the roots, we get to the bottom, we get to this place where we're untangling these knots that have been constricting human consciousness for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but specifically in the 20th century. And this is what's happening right now in a fixed sign. And it means that we can fix things. Can we fix the system? I'm not sure. The system may be irrevocably damaged and broken, and that might be just a titanic and gargantuan act. But we can fix things at small levels. We can fix things inside of ourselves. Maybe we can fix things in our community, whatever that thing is. But it's also the time where we get to look behind the power, behind the power, behind the power, to get to the source and the root of the power, to pull back the curtain and to see the shadows of deceit and manipulation. That's what it's about. Now, if we don't do this now, when Saturn moves into Sagittarius, it can get really tricky, okay? Really, really tricky. Because Sagittarius rules law and freedom, right? And when you have Saturn on top of law and freedom, Saturn constricts, Sagittarius expands. What do we have? We have something that is much, much more constrictive than we're used to. So we could have the potential for new laws, new measures to increase our security. These could all take place during Saturn and Sagittarius. Now, what will happen is that the debate for freedom versus security will never be greater in our society than when Saturn moves into Sagittarius. You see, each time, we're at a point in time now through our own evolution, that each time we move into a Saturn cycle, those energies become much more intense than ever before. If you go back 28 years ago and look at where Saturn was in Scorpio at that time, I'm sure it was intense, but nothing like it is now. And the same can be said when Saturn moves into Sagittarius. So the odds keep getting greater and greater and greater and greater and greater, or they become, the aspect itself becomes more important as it cycles through. We're living in a time of compression. Saturn was closer on Sunday night than at any other time in recent memory. This is from space.com. Let me just read this here. It says, this is I was going to read this to you in total. Here we go. This is from last week. It was the 27th was when this was printed. So we're reading this in retrospect. The giant planet should put on a spectacular show with its famous icy rings tilted at a perfect angle for viewing during Saturn's close approach to Earth. Let me just go there. It's linked. Here we go. It says here, in the early hours of Sunday morning, the planet Saturn reached opposition. So opposition to what? The sun, right? The sun in Taurus. Opposition has several effects on Saturn. Most important, it marks the arrival in the evening. Its arrival in the evening sky. Okay, so think about that. Think about what Saturn means in terms of everything I've just talked about, in terms of the last 2 weeks, in terms of Beltane, in terms of the beginning of the Illuminati on May 1st, 1776. Saturn has now come into our consciousness in the evening sky, okay? It is now visible all night long, a treat for the many people who consider this the most beautiful object in the sky. On Saturday and Sunday nights, Saturn can be found in the southeastern sky. Saturn's opposition also marks the planet's maximum brightness for the year, and the brightest it has been for a number of years. At magnitude 0.2, the ring planet now outshines the first magnitude star, Spica, in the constellation Virgo. Astronomers measure the brightness of night sky in terms of magnitude, with low numbers denoting exceptional brightness. You can easily spot Saturn and Spica by following the old rule. Arc to Arcturus, then speed on to Spica. Start by following the arc formed by the handle of the Big Dipper away from the Dipper's bowl, in a broad arc across the sky, first reaching Arcturus in kite-shaped boots, then onto Spica and Saturn in Virgo. Sparkling Spica is on the right, steady Saturn on the left. Starlight coming from a distant point is deflected by the Earth's atmosphere in twinkles. A planet like Saturn is larger than a star in apparent size, so is less affected by atmospheric turbulence, so shines with a steady light. So you'll still be able to see Saturn. Okay, it's still in the night sky. It's just not as close because now it's moving away from the opposition. The sun is moving away from the opposition, right? In Taurus. So it's still there. You still see it. But what's interesting is that not only was it close, but guess what? A raging storm was taking place on Saturn. And this is also from space.com. This came in on yesterday. Spectacular new images from a NASA spacecraft orbiting Saturn have captured the most detailed views ever of an enormous hurricane churning around the ring planet's North Pole. The stunning new images and video of the Saturn hurricane, which were taken by NASA's Cassini probe, shows that the storm's eye is 1,250 miles wide. That's roughly, I think, about the size of Texas. About 20 times bigger than typical hurricane eyes on Earth. So think of a hurricane the size of Texas. And the Saturn maelstrom is more powerful than its Earth counterparts, with winds at its outer edge whipping around at 330 miles per hour. We did a double take when we saw this vortex because it looks so much like a hurricane on Earth. Cassini imaging team member Andrew Ingersoll of Caltech in Pasadena said in a statement, but there it is at Saturn on a much larger scale, and it is somehow getting by on the small amounts of water vapor in Saturn's hydrogen atmosphere. Saturn hurricane swirls inside a mysterious six-sided vortex. Isn't that interesting? Let me read that again. Saturn's hurricane swirls inside a mysterious six-sided vortex. Unlike hurricanes on Earth, which tend to drift northward as our planet rotates, the Saturn storm and its hexagonal vortex have been camped out at the North Pole for a while. So if you look at Saturn, you'll see a hexagon right there at the tip of the planet. It's a very interesting image. Very, very interesting. The polar hurricane has nowhere else to go, and it's likely why it's stuck at the pole. The Cassini Imaging Associate at Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, said in a statement, the Saturn hurricane is larger and more powerful than Earth hurricanes, storms on the two planets are alike in some ways. For example, both have central eyes containing very little clouds or no clouds at all. Other shared traits are high clouds forming the eye wall and a counterclockwise spin in the northern hemisphere. Cassini's instruments detected the Saturn storm shortly after the probe arrived in orbit around the ring planet in 2004. The hurricane was in darkness at the time, however, because it was in the middle of the northern Saturn winter. So what we have here is a hexagonal hurricane that is raging at the north pole of Saturn, and Saturn being closer than any other time in the year in quite some time on Earth, just this past Sunday, whipping up storms in people's lives. And Saturn has a dramatic effect on symbolism here on this planet. Many of you are aware of the hyperdimensional cube that is all over the Earth. I mean, the most striking image of the hyperdimensional cube is the Kaaba in Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And according to legend, the Kaaba has a piece of the Chintamani stone inside of it. So this is the most I would say, well known, the symbol of the hyperdimensional cube and Saturn worship. But there are other versions of the hyperdimensional cube all over the planet. There are these massive cube-like sculptures. There's one, I believe, right in front of the Vatican as well. So Saturn isn't just an astrological energy. It is an actual entity here on this planet that is worshipped. And it's through the symbolism and the energy of the hyperdimensional cube. One of the other interesting things that just came out in the last day or so is the announcement that the morning after drug, which allows a person to take it and abort a fetus, has been approved by the FDA and will be available for over-the-counter purchase by young women between the age of 15 and 17. And I posted this on Facebook. If you look at the imagery on this packaging, there is Saturn imagery. They have rings of Saturn. And it's in Scorpio. So what are we talking about? We're talking about life and death and birth and rebirth. So it's another interesting manifestation of the astral matrix hitting us, this time in terms of packaging and reproduction. I'm happy in some ways that I have a boy, because I don't know how I would deal with a 15-year-old girl getting pregnant and taking the morning after pill and knowing nothing about it. That's just my perspective. If you have a 15-year-old daughter in your life, God bless you. I'm sure you have a challenging role. Boys are challenging too, don't get me wrong. But raising a girl in our society now has got to be really fairly intense project. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a little bit of music. I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to get into something that's another current event. And it has to do with sports, and it has to do with sexuality, since we're in a Saturn and Scorpio modality today. So you don't want to miss it. I'm going to be back in just a few minutes here, and we're going to go to the next phase of the show, and I'm going to talk about something fairly interesting. And then after that, we're going to do some free readings. So if you want a free reading, stick around, and we will definitely get into that. All right, what do I want to play here? How about Last Play Now, Toy Matinee? I'll see you in 5 minutes and 11 seconds.
Now harbingers of doom. And this party is addictive, self-destructive, no doubt. So I hope that someone saves a seat for me on the last plane out.
That was Toy Matinee, last playing out, and speaking of Saturn and Scorpio, and sex, and death, the lead singer of that group died via auto-asphyxiation, meaning that while he was trying to pleasure himself and taking it to the edge, he wound up killing himself. Kind of a Saturn and Scorpio moment. But a great song, and a band that should have been a lot bigger had the lead singer not died prematurely. But we're into Saturn and Scorpio, and we're into some other really interesting revelations. We'll be doing readings here in about 15 minutes or so. So if you're waiting for a free reading, hang in there. We'll get to it. There was something else about Saturn and Scorpio that I wanted to bring up. What was it? Oh, if you are not in the chat room, hanging out there, you're missing out. There's a lot of really interesting conversation taking place. People sharing links, swapping recipes, all that good stuff. I urge you to check out the chat room live during the show. It's one of the highlights of the show, actually. So one of the things that's occurred in the past week is we had a professional athlete come out and announce that he's gay. Now, if you follow the news at all, what we've been seeing pretty steadily for the last month is a dialogue about the place of a gay athlete in professional sports. Mostly centered around football, since football is the most violent and machismo of all sports, with a very strict kind of locker room code, by the way. There's been a lot of debate on a national level about how long and when and how many athletes are gay, will be gay, decide to be gay, share that they're gay with the rest of the world, and thus break stereotypes in professional sports. Well, it didn't happen in football, but it happened in basketball to a degree. And this was just from a few days ago. I think it was last Friday when this came out. Jason Collins is a 34-year-old backup center for the Washington Wizards. And let me explain to you what that means in terms of his career path. He had played out his contract, which means that even though he is still technically on their roster, he does not have a contract. He is not signed to the team. The season, for all intents and purposes, is over because his team is no longer playing, but the season is extended because there are playoffs, which means his team is not in the playoffs. So he's still technically on the team, although once the clock ticks to 0.00 in the final game of the NBA Championship Series, he will no longer be a member of the Washington Wizards. He'll be without a contract. So yes, he is on a professional team, but there will be some. My sense is that he'll probably be signed, and it will probably be the Wizards that re-sign him. However, the only way that they would re-sign him is, and I'm being cynical here, is because of the marketing value. Because Jason Collins has never averaged more than 3 points a game throughout his entire NBA career. He's 34 years old. He's 7 feet tall. He would be the 11th or 12th guy on the roster. You would bring him into the game to take a few fouls against the team's starting center, maybe block a few shots, give the other center a rest, and then he's back on the bench. He's a marginal player playing for all intents and purposes without a contract. So we have to take this courage thing and put it into perspective, all right? He is coming out during a time where the pumps have been primed. People are clamoring for the gay Jackie Robinson, so to speak. And Collins might just actually be that player, although again, he's sort of borderline because he's not great, B, he's at the end of his career, and C, he's playing without a contract. Now, had he done this 3 years ago, now we're having a different discussion. Now I'm going to editorialize. I think that it's more opportunistic on his part than it is anything else. I'm just being honest. Had he done it 3 years ago, when he was 31 years old, playing for could be his final contract, trying to stay on the court, you better believe that would be an act of courage. But now he's got a whole career path lined up outside of basketball if his contract isn't renewed. It's cagey. It's a cagey decision on his part. But what's really strange about Jason Collins, and we're going to get into his astrology here just in a second. What's really strange about Jason Collins is, first of all, guess what? He's a twin. He's a twin. His brother Jaron also plays professional basketball. The Collins twins were the light of Stanford University's basketball eye about 20 years ago. They both came in and played together at Stanford, and they were good collegiate players. Neither of them, I think Jaron was probably the better of the two. Neither of them really lit the pros on fire. What's also interesting is that later Stanford brought in another pair of twins, the Lopez brothers, and they're now playing professional basketball. Collins also is an Illuminati name. And one of the interesting things also is that the wife of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, her name is Catherine Collins. So if you did a search now for Collins, there's probably a good chance that you would get Jason Collins versus Catherine Collins. Now, I'm not saying that this happened on purpose, okay? That they were afraid that people would type in Catherine Collins and all of a sudden figure out who she is, what her connections are, and there are shadowy connections with Catherine Collins, Tamerlan Tsarnaev's wife. But now the Collins that is taking the news and the limelight, the spotlight, is Jason Collins. So here we have this interesting kind of doubling effect going on. Again, Jupiter and Gemini. We have a twin, Jaron Collins and Jason Collins. One is straight, one isn't. Then we have another Collins in the news, Catherine Collins, and of course, both names tend to be, or happen to be, Illuminati names, Illuminati family bloodline names. Read Fritz Springmeyer's book. Collins is one of those names. Who else is a Collins? Suzanne Collins, yes. Suzanne Collins. Who is she? She is the author of The Hunger Games. Collins. Now, Jaron didn't know that his brother was gay until a year ago. So he's kept this in the closet for 33 years. He had a 7-year long-term relationship with a woman. They were engaged, and he called off the engagement. And the reason he called it off is because, well, ultimately he figured out he was gay, but he was with this woman for 7 years. Now, it was her choice to be with him, but that's a long time to be held on a string. What's interesting about his chart is that when he came out last week, were Saturn. Saturn's on his natal Venus. He has Venus in Scorpio, 7 degrees, Saturn right on it. So he had a Saturn-Venus conjunction dealing with issues of his own sexuality. So here we have the astrological imprint taking place in his life. He was forced on some level to confront his own sexuality. Now, I believe that. And I believe that he did what he did because the pressure was probably too great. Ultimately, Saturn comes in, hits his Venus in Scorpio, got to do it, got to come clean, oh, I'm gay. Got that off my chest. If you listen to the guy, he sounds quite relieved. So good for him. I'm glad he came to some internal realization. But the challenge of it all is that it looks really, in my mind, slightly opportunistic. That's just me talking. But the fascinating part is the whole twin piece and the Collins piece and the Collins piece and the Collins piece. He has his moon in Capricorn, and where was Saturn closer to Earth with a storm raging, and we've just come through the Capricorn moon. So again, this is another instance of astrology impacting his life. So you have to ask, well, why isn't his twin brother gay? Well, that's interesting. That's an interest. See, there's this whole debate about are people born gay? Is there a gay gene? I don't think they've isolated the gay gene, by the way. I mean, I could be wrong. If somebody in the chat room or somebody wants to send me an email and show me the scientific research where they've actually determined, like they can find genes, like they can find a gene that determines whether or not you're going to have Tay-Sachs or sickle cell or whatever. But if there has been the isolation of the gay gene, let me know. I'd love to be enlightened and informed about this. But there's this notion that people are born gay. And if that's the case, then what happened to his brother? How come the same gene wasn't passed on to him? And I know that different genes get passed back and forth. I'm just curious. I'm just throwing that out there. It's an interesting discussion to have. He has Mercury in Sagittarius retrograde, which means that he would do something like this after the fact. Mercury in Sagittarius is about speaking truth. But retrograde, there's a hesitancy to do that. He also has Jupiter in Leo retrograde. So anyway, God bless Jason Collins. Good for you to come to the realization, and wish you all the best there. Okay, so it is now 1 o'clock here in Central Texas, and I am open for business. If you want to call in and get a free reading, let me give you the number. It is 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. Just jump right in line, and we'll get you right on the show and look at your chart. It's been a pretty busy week for me. I've got a bunch of readings lined up for the rest of the week. I was on the Vinny Eastwood show on Friday, and believe it or not, I actually got some people interested in what I'm doing. from being on Vinny's show. So that was a really good experience for me in terms of, broadcasting what I do, but also it was good because I really like Vinny. He's a very nice guy, and that's another radio option for you to listen to, is the Vinny Eastwood Show. He's got an eclectic lineup of guests, and he hits it hard. He works, I think, almost every day, and he's I think he's like a 1 or 2 man show doing what he's doing. So I recommend Vinny. Check him out. If you didn't listen to Friday's interview with Darren Williams, I highly recommend it. I got a lot of really positive response from that interview, and people loved Darren's level of research and what he was able to uncover with Margaret Thatcher. So if you haven't heard it, go check that out. It's really worth listening to. On Friday, I'll be bringing Tom Palladino back on. We're going to talk more about scalar healing. I will share with you my experience around scalar healing because I've been on his program now for about 3 weeks, and I'm pretty healthy. I have a lot of energy, and we'll talk more about that on Friday if we get into that. And hopefully I'll have another guest or two to fill out Friday's show. It'll be the return of Tom Palladino, the inventor of scalar energy healing. 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. If you want to chime in for a reading or talk about astrology or have a question or whatever you want to do, that's the number. Trying to think if there's anything else coming up. I'm going to be in the Boulder, Colorado area in July for 3 days. I'll be doing a taping with Jay Widener, Regina Meredith, and that will be for Gaian TV, and you'll be able to actually access that and download that and watch me, believe it or not. There's a face behind this voice. And Gaian TV can be picked up through Roku. If you don't know what Roku is, I highly recommend it. It's a revolution in media and accessing personal media through alternative technology. Roku is a box that you plug into your TV, and it picks up on the wireless signal in your house. If you don't have a wireless signal, you can do a hard line into the Roku box, and it offers up a whole host of channels, some of which are free, some of which you pay for. One of the free channels is Pandora, so you can listen to Pandora through your Roku box. They have a free movie channel called Cracked, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. You can also get pay channels like Hulu and Netflix, and Gaian TV will be another channel, or is another channel that you can access through Roku. So if you're interested in any of that material, you can do that through Gaian and your Roku box. I'll be talking on Regina's show about, there'll be 2 separate episodes. One is going to be called Boomer Angst, and that's going to be about the Pluto and Leo generation and what they face, what their shadow is, what their cultural redemption could be if they face their shadow. And the other episode is Generation XXX, which is essentially the millennials. This is the Pluto and Scorpio generation. So I'll be breaking down both of those on Gaian. Some of the material you've heard here before, but I guarantee you there will be some new material as well. And that will take place in July, and probably towards the end of July, early August, that'll be up on Gaian TV. So the proliferation of free association radio, navigating the astrological matrix, and Robert Phoenix is taking place before our very eyes. And hopefully we can reach out and connect with a few more people along the way. Because I've just realized what I do, and if I don't do it, well, I don't think I would last too long at Starbucks. Let's put it that way. All right, 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. If I don't hear from anybody in the next 5 to 10 minutes, I will shut it down. And I'll just see you on Friday, because I need people. Let's see. Let's just get into some other astrological stuff today. We'll wait for the phone lines to fill up. The moon has just moved into Aquarius. That should lighten things up a little bit, give us more of a detached perspective. On an emotional level, we got the big stellium here in Taurus now. Mars at 8 degrees, Venus at 20, Mercury just moved into Taurus at 0, and the Sun at 11. So there's a lot of bull in the air. A lot of bull. Today's birthdays, we have some interesting birthdays. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who is often quoted as one of the greatest mystics of our time and the person who came up with the idea of the noosphere. It's an interesting concept, and the noosphere is basically a band of consciousness that surrounds the planet. I believe it's connected to the Van Allen radiation belts, and it is the repository of our thoughts and our feelings, our intentions, our aspirations, all that stuff. And if we somehow empower the noosphere, if we power it up with sacred thought and sacred action, the noosphere in turn empowers us and charges us. Today is the birthday of Judy Collins and Rita Coolidge, two songstresses from the 1970s. Rita Coolidge, of course, was the girlfriend of Chris Christopherson for a while. I think she was on that cover. They did a record together, Chris and Rita. Chris Christopherson, I believe, is a Capricorn, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. It's also a handler. And some of you know what that means. Today is also the birthday of William Lilly, who is a major, and I mean a major astrologer. It was Lilly who essentially brought astrology to a whole new level in the West. Briefly, British astrologer and author, he studied astrology with Ashmole and published books of prediction from 1633, the author of Christian Astrology, 1647, A Guide for Astrologers, 1676, and an autobiography in 1715. Lilly acquired, which allowed him the leisure to study and follow his bent. Lilly, I believe, succeeded John Dee, and apparently he was more of an impressive magus than even Dee himself. He died of a stroke on the 9th of June in 1681. On September 15, 2003, at 11 a.m., a plaque in his honor was unveiled, and it was the first such plaque in honor of an astrologer. According to Anthony Demetrius, the plaque is situated on the side wall of the now unused Strand Underground Station beside King's College, in a short distance from the exact spot that Lilly's house once stood over 300 years ago. The first green plaque was erected in honor of Churchill in 1991, and Lilly's is the 53rd. The ceremony was attended by the Deputy Mayor of Westminster. So today is the birthday of one of the most important astrologers and maguses of our time, William Lilly. You look at his chart, had a very strong Earth trine, and that included Mars in Virgo at 6 degrees and Uranus in Taurus at 10 degrees. And let's see what else we have there in that. And the moon in Capricorn at 14 degrees. So it's a real strong Earth trine. Saturn-Sun opposition, which meant that he worked his butt off. And Mercury, Uranus, Venus, Sun all in the second house. So he was bound to have money. And we look at, this is interesting, we look at Jupiter Jupiter is the sign of good fortune, beneficence, benevolence, and abundance. He has it in the sign of Libra, relationships, in the 7th house. But I'll tell you right now, that was a marriage of financial convenience for Mr. Lilly because he had Moon square Jupiter in his chart, which really meant that he just wanted the dough. And with Moon in the 11th house in Capricorn, he's extremely detached. And he had a Moon Uranus trine, and the Moon Sun trine, the Moon Venus trine. The Moon's a very, very important figure in his chart. Aggressive, again, with the Earth trine with Mars. Neptune on his descendants, which means that there is a bit of deception, illusion, and delusion in his one-on-one relationships. Extremely critical with Mars in Virgo in the 7th house. This was not a person I would want to live with. And then Saturn in Scorpio, again, other people's money in the 8th house. Saturn, Sun, opposition, Sun in the 2nd. He may have had money, but it was not an easy relationship for this man on many levels. And then lastly, he had his true node conjunct his midheaven in Sagittarius, poised for great things and long-lasting achievements. Today is William Lilly's birthday. Other birthdays today, let's see, who do we have? Glenn Ford, the great American actor who had sort of the rugged everyman, good looks. He could play a good guy. He could play a bad guy. Today is Glenn Ford's birthday. Glenn Ford was a real movie star. In a time when we had movie stars, Glenn Ford was it. Another birthday today, Jack Paar, the person who essentially started the late night talk format. He was the guy. Steve Allen, I believe, was first. And then it was Jack Paar, and then it was Johnny Carson, and now we have everybody else. When I was a kid, I was, I'll never forget this moment. I was I think I was 4 years old. I might have been a little bit younger, maybe 3. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and this is when I had a crib. This is how young I was. I was still sleeping in a crib. And I climbed out of my crib, and I went into the living room, and I turned on the TV. My parents were asleep. I turned on the TV, and it was The Tonight Show. And I think it might have been Jack Paar, although I'd have to check. It could be Johnny Carson. But I do remember the two people that were on that show. They were Dan Blocker and, what's his name? Touched by an Angel, Michael Landon. Because they were the big stars of Bonanza at that time. And I remember that. It's one of those moments. It's one of those moments from childhood that sticks in your brain, and likely for a reason. Because I believe if you look back at your childhood, you'll find that there are these archetypal moments that define one's life, for good and for bad. That there are clues that we can find in these sort of bright, shimmering, or dark and intense memories. And I've got about half a dozen of them, and that's one of them. I don't know what prompted me to get up in the middle of the night, to get out of my crib and turn on The Tonight Show. But the only thing I can relate it to is what I'm doing now, and how it, in some ways, it impacted me and influenced me on some level. Like I was supposed to go see that. And I have to say that when I was in middle school, much to my chagrin, I was addicted to staying up late and watching The Tonight Show. I had a TV in my room, and so I'd watch The Tonight Show, and then I'd watch Tomorrow's Show, and on and on and on. And I would fall asleep at around 2:30 or 3 in the morning and get up for school. I was a mess. But I loved it. There's a whole other world that was opening up for me. So Jack Parr's birthday is today. Duke of Wellington. His birthday is today. Theo Van Gogh, the brother of Vincent Van Gogh. His birthday is today. And there's a few other people, but those are the heavy hitters, particularly William Lilly. Okay, let's check in on the astrological hotline here, see if there's anybody who wants to talk, have their chart read. Ah, yes. Looks like we have a customer. Hello there. Hello? Hello? Going once, going twice. 540, you are now back on hold. This reminds me of when I used to read tarot when I was hitting the streets of San Francisco and sitting down in my chair, waiting for somebody to sit down, sit next to me, so I could read their cards. It was an interesting experience. The waiting was really a trip. It was a very important part of it. You had to have the right attitude, you had to have the right energy to wait. All right. I think that's it. I'm going to wrap today's show up. Can't believe it. Nobody wants their chart read. Oh, well. It's all right. I have plenty to do. Trust me. Plenty to do. Okay, so let's do this. Let's meet again on Friday, and we will get into scalar healing energy and hopefully one other guest, which I have in mind. And I'll try to get a hold of them and bring them on and talk about their healing modality as well. But for sure, we'll have Tom Palladino back on, and no doubt the world will be a different place between now and Friday, because it always is, right? It always is. Okay, so use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. If you'd like to donate to this program, please feel free to do so. RobertPhoenix.com is where I have my donation button. It's on the upper left-hand side. I'm working on a new post, a new astrological post. I'll have that up in the next day or so. And I also do readings for people for a living, and you can also access that there as well. All right, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. You've been you've been listening to Navigating the Astrological Matrix. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back on Friday. See you then.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.